Hi again. Let's continue our discussion of parse and creating some comments, okay? So as I explained in the last video, what I'd like to do is I'd like to rearrange the list here so that it just displays the title of the post as a link, and then we'll add some JavaScript that allows you to click on the link and then display the full post up above, okay? So what we need is we need a link here, and I need the link to include the object ID. So as we saw in the last video, we could get any record from the table from its object ID, right? So as long as we have that object ID, then we can load any one of these, and we know that this is a unique identifier for every one of these objects, okay? So how are we going to do that? First, let's get this thing set up, okay? So what I think I'm going to do, and you might do this differently, I'm going to do it like this. This is an H3. I'm going to put an anchor inside it, and then that anchor tag in the href, I'm going to put the object ID for each of my posts, okay? So I'll go into my file here, and I'll find the getPosts function. So this function gets all the posts and lists them inside of this UL right here called list posts, okay? And what it does right now is it collects the title, the content, the username, it gets an image, and it kind of gets the URL for the image and makes an image tag, and then it writes an li tag, an h3, a paragraph, the image tag, and the closing li tag, and then it adds, when it's all done doing that once for every post, it adds all of it to this list post item here in the HTML, using the jQuery's HTML, right? So what I'd like to do is I'd like to turn this H3 into an anchor, right? So I'll put the H3 on the outside, and then we'll do href equals, and then we'll close it here. So there's our href attribute. And then on the other side, we'll put the closing anchor tag. Okay, so now we've got an H3 with an anchor inside. And then what I want to do is I want to put the ID of the post in here, okay? So to get the ID, what we'll do is I'll just make another variable here up above with the title content user, right? And what I'd like to do is I'd like to put the, just make a variable called ID, and we can get the ID in this way. So if I say results, bracket I, remember we're inside this for loop, and we're looping through every item in the results array, right? So for each item in the results array, results bracket I is going to give us that parse object, and that's each one of these things is going to be, each one of these parse objects is going to be one of the rows in our database, okay? So each one of these things is a row, and this parse object results bracket I is going to be each one of these in turn, and that object encompasses all of the data in each of the columns, okay? So this first column is called object ID, and I think you can get that by saying get object ID, but you can actually get it this way too by just saying .id. This field is special, and so it has its own little extra helper property or something, right? So you can just say .id and it'll give you the ID. So we'll take that shortcut there. Then we don't have to say get, right? And then down here, I'd like to include the ID value inside the quotation marks for the href. So what I'll do is I'll put the two quotation marks, two plus signs, and the ID, right? And then maybe I'll remove the small tag, the image, and the content, okay? We could actually remove those things from up here too. I'll just leave them in there for now, and let's give it a test. So I'll save that, go to my browser here, refresh it, and now you can see each one of these things is a link. And if I click on it, I'm going to get a 404 because this file name is not really a valid file name, right? So let's go back there. But let's inspect it, right? So if I inspect the link, what I want to see is I want to see the href here, and I want to see that, special parse ID right here, right? And I can see that that's happening for each of my links, right? Oh, this one's got a different name, okay? So there we go. So now, how do we use that, right? Let's go back and we'll need to add a function to these anchors, right? Because now if I click them, the anchor is going to want to go to this as if it thinks it's another HTML file or something, but it's not, and so we get this error, right? So so let's add a little JavaScript click action to these, right? Now realize here that when our page loads initially, this list posts, this UL is empty, so we can't add a click action to the non-existent anchor tags in here. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the on binding for our event, okay? And so what I'll do is let me actually put this above get posts. I'll just put it right here. And what we'll do is we'll say jQuery. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, I'm going to target the list posts div, right? So I'm going to or the list item. It's actually UL, right? So we're going to target that, and then we'll say .on. So what we're saying is when, and then I'll put a click action here. So I'm going to say, okay, when a click action occurs on this thing, let's search it for an anchor element inside. So it has to be a descendant of list post. So when you click on list post, if something inside there is an anchor, then we'll execute this function right here. Okay? So this is a little different than adding the click event or the submit event. Okay, but in this case, if we create or remove, or if anchor tags cease to exist and then come into being, this click will still function on them. If we added the clicks directly to anchor tags in there and then they were removed and new anchor tags were added, the clicks would not work. Or if we tried to add clicks to anchor tags inside list posts, when the page loaded and there weren't any anchor tags in there, then we wouldn't be, the computer wouldn't add any events to them because they don't exist, right? So let's also add the event object here. We're going to get some use out of that. And then there we go. So what are we going to do? The first thing we're going to do is we're going to say event.prevent default. Okay? And then what we want to do is we want to get the ID. So how do we get the ID? Well, the ID is in the href. Okay? So if I say, var ID equals, and we'll just put it in this ID variable here, and then jQuery this is the link that you clicked on, and then it has an attribute. And in this case, our anchor tag is it's an anchor tag. It's not an input element like a form element, right? With form elements, we can use the val method, and that will get us the value in a form element, but regular tags don't have that. Only form elements have that, right? So if we say attribute, though, we can get the value from an attribute, right? And we just name the attribute that we want, and I want the value from the href, and so that should give me the ID, right? And then we can follow the same thing we did before. So we'll say var, I'll just spell it out, query equals new parse query, and then we want to query the post class or table, right? And we also want to say equal to, because we don't want all the posts, we just want posts where the object ID is equal to the ID that was in the href. Okay, so here's ID, right? This one came from the href, right? Okay, and then we can run our query. So we'll say query.find. Okay, and so for right now, we'll just log it to the console. And then in the next video, we'll worry about displaying the detail view. So there's our success function, error function, okay? And right, and then for success here, on a success, we will get results, which will be an array, and then on an error, we'll get an error object. So just like we did in the example earlier, I'll just say results. We'll get the first element because since we're getting an ID, it should be just one element. We shouldn't get more than one. And then we'll do .get, title. Right, and then that should display the title for whichever link we click on. Okay, and then if just in case we'll in case there's an error, we'll put error.message here. Okay, and that'll display our message. So there we go. Let's give it a try, right? So I'll refresh our page here, and I'll pull up the console, and then we'll click on Geo. Oh, look, there we go. It says Geo. Let's say parse is fun. Oh, parse is fun, right? And so what's happening here is clicking on this is getting the ID from the link, the href, running a query on parse, asking for an item from the post table where the object ID equals the value that is the in the href for the link. Okay, I like cheeseburgers. And then we'll just stop right there.